does this look like in comparison to what you have in your hand there, Mr. Your budget grid? Does it look like a budget grid in essence? Some form of a staffing plan? How many nurses we need during the day shift, and how many nurses we need during the night? But what have we varied in this instance? The number during the day, each day of the week, based on what we know about our assessment of our demand each day of the week, right? So we've in essence started a staffing plan within our budget constraints is what we've done, okay, based on shifts. We've said nothing about the total number of people we need to fill those shifts yet. That's the next step. So now what we've got to do, and the reason I have these numbers color-coded, you'll notice that some up here are green, some are brown, and so forth, right? Notice that this one is green, and this one is green. Because you want to be certain as you get this in here, and you vary per day, you see how these vary per day in terms of total number of hours needed? Whereas the average is 209, on Wednesdays, based on my actual demand understanding, I actually really need 308.5. Versus Sundays only 103.78. This is where I say this is the opportunity if you have that big variation to understand it very carefully and build a better mousetrap around it so that you're not understaffed on day one and overstaffed on day two and your nurses are running around and spent their heads spinning off their shoulders going, sure, you done? Yeah. If you're stable, and I know you're stable, you're very stable, you have one unit that's stable, we got other units, Geraldine's units, 20 every day. It's a lot easier. What do? You put 20 in there every day. And you just build a consistent staffing grid, so it becomes a lot easier. But if you're not, you have an opportunity to better match supply and demand fundamentally. Okay?
If we don't have data that is really accurate from our unit, like in my case, where
You had beds closed.
beds closed and all in construction and things like that, that I can't really see a picture, how do I use this now to be able to formulate something that I can?
What you have to make an assumption in your world then is you can say, I've opened these beds. Since I've opened these beds, what little bit of data you do have, run it and see where your ADC is on that. Because you're going to be fairly consistent on your unit.
I'm almost always.
You're almost always full. So you're going to be programming that almost always full scenario.
Okay.
You have 27 or 28 patients every day. When you open your beds, you're going to probably fill them up. So you can make a planning assumption that you're going to go from 12 to 16. Okay? All right. So, for the variable staff, we staffed a ratio. So down here, we started that conversation with 1.8. Can we really work 1.8 nurses? Okay. So we got to make some managerial choices at this point, right? So what do we really think we can work? 2? 2. 1.8 is closer to 2 than 1. We don't want to mess our ratios up, right? So the way this worksheet is set, I can change this. Now, yes, there's formulas in here, but then you change them. Anything in yellow is your opportunity to play with, right? So we say 2. Okay, what happened to the number of actual shifts per day? Did it go up a little bit? Went up a little bit. Number of hours went up a little bit, right? Your ratio for nurses, I have your ratios set in here so as you work this to your expectation, you can see what your choices do in terms of impact around your tech and nurses ratios, okay? So you went down to a 4.55 for that particular instance, okay? All right, so for nurses for the next day, 3.7. Which way do we want to go? We go to 4? Okay, we go 4. What about the next day? Up or down? Halfway. You can go either way and then decide. You want to go up?
Do 4.
You want to go
I
4
would
or
do
5?
4 and do 6 on Wednesday. I don't know.
Well, where's our highest peak on this unit? Wednesday. Where do you think you're most likely to have the most activity? On the Wednesday? Would you want to load Wednesday a little heavier?
Yeah.
Potentially.
So maybe
So we want to go 4 here, 6 here. Okay, what about 5.1? 5?
Thursday's still 291, so that's very close to Wednesday.
You won't tell me? It's your grid.
I think you might be.
I would make it 6.
I think so too.
Just from the surgical world, you know, you've got 12 surgeries. You may be able to accommodate 12 admissions, but then you have to think of the nurse's workload as far as frequent vitals for
Right.
12 patients.
Right.
Monitoring them post anesthesia, 12 patients,
Yeah,
stuff
and
like
this is
that.
where the acuity
That's where
system can help
acuity
us.
That's where
So I would say
That's
six.
I would go up
Go
again,
6?
Mm-hmm.
and I would go down on Friday.
Yeah, just make it three.
Like
around at the
What about Saturday?
2.
2? All right, so overall, we're now up to an average of 16.2 and an average of 194. Our goal, and what I'm talking about is these two numbers here. When we're done playing with this grid, our goal is to be as close to 17.5 as possible and as close to 209 hours as possible, because that's our starting point, right?
We
Okay.
didn't do anything.
So we.
So do you wanna,
Shift some stuff and go back up a little bit.
yep, all right, what about text? We need to do the whole thing before we start shifting anything. Remember one tag?
Mhm.
What about the next day? 2? 2 or 3?
2,
2 or 3?
3.
3? 2 or 3? 3? 2 or 3?
Two.
2?
One.
Two is what?
Do it. 1, I got 1, do here, 2, 2.
Two and then one on Saturday.
What about, and we're already at 1 there,
Yeah.
okay? All right, so you want to keep this whole process the same for nights right now, to see where we go. What I would suggest in doing this is build them equivalently, and then to see where your total comes to after you make the adjustments, and then go from there, okay?
Is this assuming free charge?
Yeah, this assumes free
Yeah.
charge.
Okay.
You always, from a budget standpoint, you assume a free charge. All right, so we're gonna copy this all the way down.
Oh.
All right, so now where are we?
Still 16.5.
There we go, sorry. Now where are we?
16 really close.
So
Is it supposed to be 17.5?
it's 17.5 is your target goal, and 209 hours per day on average. And our average right now over here is 16.7 and 200, so we have some opportunity, okay? So where would you like to add the opportunity? What do we know about our demand and workload on this unit? This is
Highest
ortho-
Wednesday.
Wednesdays and Thursdays we get killed,
And it's daytime.
and it's daytime. So what do you want to do?
If we,
I would go up a nurse on Tuesday, because that's where we drop down.
you mean give them another one on Tuesday?
Tuesday.
Yeah.
Want to give them a nurse on Tuesday?
Tuesday has 257 targeted hours.
And we're setting
and
at-
Wednesday
The
has 308.
5.6 floor rate.
So our ratio.
We're setting at 208.
And our ratio, our ratio is 5.
The actual, oh, I didn't go all the way down. 17 would, I'm looking at this down.
Because that was when we were teetering back and forth on. So if you have the if you have the opportunity to bump up, I would bump
I
up.
would
Bump it up.
Mhm.
All right. What next?
Hmm.
What about your support?
What about text, yeah,
What about?
so if we went up on tech on,
BM sheet on Tuesday, are you gonna do this the same?
but if you looked at the volume by the hour was during the middle of the day on Tuesday, on.
Now we're putting on the ice.
Right.
We're putting the icing on the cake.
Right.
Do you see the point in doing the worksheet this way? Because when you're actually making an actual staffing plan, the end goal is to hit what the budget that has been sent down to you, but to do it in a way that closely as possible matches supply and demand on a daily basis and accounts for your workload. So where do we want to account for that?
I would go up a PST on Wednesday, if that's our highest workload day,
You want to go up there?
to help assist with
All right.
vital signs.
Or,
We're at 17 shifts per day on average right now. We've got a 0.5 shift to give. Is there any place else you might see an opportunity? There's your ratios.
I was gonna say, tech on Tuesday.
what about Wednesday night? Because that's the high, for PST.
But they don't have a volume on Wednesday night.
Wednesday's sort of the biggest day.
Wednesday
Overall
day,
it is.
No,
that's
targeted hours.
overall ADC, don't forget that.
Oh,
Yeah, that's
Don't
targeted
forget,
hours.
ADC is here, the
I was looking at
workload,
admission and discharge.
yeah, the workload of admission and discharge is what you're adding on
So
top.
they're
So
gonna
what do we know
be on
about
the
overnight
highest
admissions and
census on
discharge?
Wednesday.
There's
None.
uniform
Very
That's why
easy.
That's
I wouldn't put extra icing on the
night.
night shift.
So just leave it?
If you're gonna ice this cake, given what we know about it, where are you gonna ice it?
The
Day,
top.
Some
day
days.
shift, and day shift.
Day shift.
Right.
Okay? So what do you want?
I would do the third PST on Tuesdays, day shift.
Go there? Let's see what happens.
I'd
We're
like to be
17.1, we got more to
every
give.
And why not take one more up on Thursday for those of you too high days?
We'll go to 4,
There
17.2.
you go.
Well, we've got 0.3 to go. And you're only at 206.9 hours on average. You're targeted 2.9, or 209.
What about,
209.86, almost 210.
what
I
about,
like Bath Tech.
I want an ambulation.
Tech's a tech in this world.
A public,
PST is a
public
PST.
relations
What
tech.
about a fourth nurse on Friday, day shift, maybe
To
to
get
help
out the
get discharges out?
Yeah.
Before you get out for the weekend?
Yeah.
Okay. 17.4.
Because they run from
208.6.
291 to
Let me ask you this, from a budget standpoint. Where should you run your budget to? Should you really run it right to the max?
No.
No, you really want to run your budget to about 97 to 98% of what's authorized.
To allow for.
It allows you that unforeseen slack, and when you don't have that unforeseen slack and you hit 97% of the budget as a manager, what do you look like? You look like a rock star, quite frankly. That was always my internal target when I ran EMS budgets. If they handed me my budget in Wichita was $25 million. I always ran my budget at 97% of $25 million. And we always hit it. And council loved me for it. My bosses loved me for it because it gave money, unforeseen money back, and it looked like I knew what I was doing when I really maybe didn't.
So then we have green instead of red when we look at our
Right.
month. Okay.
So do you like it? Do you see the point and the premise of what we've done to build a better mousetrap and still come up to the same overall objective as the budget that was handed to us?
Yep, call Joyce, tell her about her grid.
Well, we ain't done yet.
She's like, what?
We gotta figure out how many actual people we gotta hire to fill these shifts. Because we got vacation and sick leave and so forth and all, right? All right, so what's next in the next step? We've gotta convert these shifts into required number of FTEs to fill them,
Excuse me,
okay?
Steve, can I make sure I'm on the
Yes,
track?
ma'am.
Because I'm the slow one.
Okay?
So I'm looking to make sure that I have filled the required average daily shift in my budgeted hours per day.
Yep.
I want to get it close.
You wanna make sure that these match with those numbers down there at the bottom as you do this, that's correct. That's the intent of this, right here again, everybody. To Jacelyn's point, it's a very good point. The reason I have these color coded is anything down here should match what's going on up here as your starting point when you're done. That's your guidepost to be sure you didn't accidentally overstaff.
Why did you say that again?
These are color coded. So 17.4 is my shifts per day, my person shifts, and it's color coded to match that one. So when you're looking at this, does that one match? Do the hours match of 209.86? Or am I less? I'm at 208.6 here, so I'm an hour per day less overall. That's 365 hours gained already. It gives me a little bit of slack, actually. It gives you a little bit of wiggle room. And as you go along and manage this budget, for instance, we've made some assumptions about volume and then adding that extra nurse in certain places or the extra PST. If you don't see that that's holding up to what you thought, you can always rebuild it and assess it down to save some hours if need be. Okay? What I've done is given you a very discrete way and process to continually assess every schedule period, kind of where you are. Make sense?
That's, okay, so
High level.
what's a good
Yeah,
time?
high level right now, and I expect that. As I told everybody, what I want you to do when we're done with this, I want you to put your ADC and your patient days and all of your work standard in this and build it, but call me. Email me, call me, and I will be available to you, because I want you to do that as homework, and we'll talk about what you see as your outcomes and your opportunities before we talk about how to do variance analysis in the next session. And in the last session, you're going to see this again, but I'm going to divide you into teams, and we're going to spend 3 hours going through a scenario, and you're going to report out on the scenario and how you handled it to build your budget as a kind of culmination. Okay? All right. So, do we have any untoward ratios? Are any ratios out of whack as we've done this? That's an important thing, because again, what's our point in doing this? We're emphasizing numbers and budgets, but what have we held in balance in this process? Fundamentally. Employee and patient safety around what the expected ratios are, right? And what have we done from an employee engagement standpoint potentially? We've made their work environment much more consistent because we buried the level of nurses and PSTs to that demand level, statistically, right? So do you think you're gonna have happier employees if they're not coming in and getting killed on those Wednesdays and Thursdays? Definitely, yeah. That's you got a question? Or you just counting? Okay. All right, so, go ahead.
I'm sorry, you asked about our balance of.
Yeah, do we see anything out of whack here? Do we see anything that's grossly bad relative to what the expected ratios are as we've done this?
No, Ireland.
What have we done on our couple of busiest days? And our really heavy day to get people out before the weekend, actually? We've actually moved our nurse ratios down to some of the lowest on our heaviest days by this, right? Instead of them being the exact opposite in reverse, where they're the highest ratios because we staff static relative to volume, right? Sound like a plan? I like it. I'm gonna let Joyce execute. What do you think?
Is that standard at the 25th?
You talk about the work standard?
Yeah.
That moves all over the place. I've heard that we're moving those to the 25th percentile. I don't know that for a fact. I had some experience with that. Yeah. So again, that's an executive level decision. Even my boss as the director, we don't have a lot of say in that. That's something that's happening at a very high level. With input from probably the chief physicians and the CNEs and the other people.
Right. Not just be, from a.
Yeah, part of your goal is that if they tell you that they're gonna move the standard, you should have information about, okay, these are my demand patterns, this is what I know about my staffing and my mixes, and this is what I know about my efficiency on the unit relative to that standard and my length of stay throughput and my task time throughput for all the nurse and tech activities on it. Are they optimized or are they not? So that you can make those arguments one way or for another, that you say, yeah, I think I can support a movement that way, or this is exactly why, and I can back this up with data, why I think it needs to be a little higher, or whatever the case may be.
This would have been good for me to know before I got with because I took that, what you said about they changed the standard. And I'm sitting there going, they just changed the standard halfway through the year. It's like, so it took me a little while to work through that.
Okay, so what don't we know yet? So we're saying that we need 2 nurses on Sunday, 4 nurses on Monday, 5 nurses on Wednesday.
How many people we need to hire?
Do we know anything about how many people we actually need to hit that standard based on vacation? Because for instance, if I do 5 nurses on, or let me do this, simplify it. We have 1 charge nurse on day shift every day of the week. How many bodies is that functionally? Anecdotally, how many bodies is that?
2
Got at least 2 because we work 0.9 shifts, so based on the 12 hours. So that's 1.8, right? So functionally, we're covering 6 of the shifts, but we got 1 open. That's that residual amount that we have to decide what to do with, whether that's going to be overtime, whether that's going to be whatever that is. And that's the same way in the nurse realm. That's the basic premise of where we go next. So what we have to determine, and what you have up here is FTEs per person shift. What we have to determine is how many total FTEs it takes to cover each and every person shift that we have to fill each day. Does that make sense? So in this instance, I've got a standard of 2.26 FTEs. So what that is saying is to cover that one charge nurse position 7 days a week on day shift, I need 2.26 FTEs of coverage to do that. Now how you divide that pie again as a manager is up to you. Now the charge nurse, that's pretty simple. Yeah, that's our tenured nurses, that's gonna be people with experience, they're gonna be full-time .9s and so forth. But for instance, if that were one PST, 6 to 7 days a week for day shift, we need 2.26 FTEs. That could potentially be what? We need 2.26 FTEs. Where am I? There it is. We need 2.26 FTEs, right? To cover one PST position we're talking about, right? So that could be a combination of anything. I could say that I want 1.9, 1.5, and the rest .1s. In theory. I don't know, that's it's just kind of theory. That's not practicality. You don't want to do that practically.
Yeah.
But what we really would do is say I need 2.9s for 1.8. So that leaves me a residual of, what is that? I don't know what that is. 0.5? 0.5 roughly? Could you in theory hire a 0.5? And then and what do I have associated with that PST position? Because I've already accounted for fundamentally in the beginning PTO. I had virtually no overtime calculated into that PTO position at that point because of my choice of how to hire it or how to staff it. Does that make sense? So that's what we're talking about and how we convert this. So how do we convert person shifts to the actual number of FTEs? That's the next section of your chart down here. You scroll to the right. These are your average person shifts for each one of these positions. So you need one person shift on average for charge. You kind of take these out. These don't really count. They stay the same as you'll notice all the way across, right? But you need one person shift per day on average for a unit secretary, right? So what you do, and how do I get to that standard, first of all? Let's back up a little bit. So that 2.26 standard. What you do with that is you take the total number of FTEs that you need to cover the hours and divide that by the average required daily shifts of 17.5. And that gets you the total number of FTEs per daily person shift you need to cover that 7 days a week. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's where that comes from. And again, the nice thing about the worksheet is as you study it, go back and look at the formulas, it will show you what's calculated against what. All right. So we need